That reading from Mark is kind of astounding, especially if you compare it to what Matthew wrote. Matthew wrote 10 to 15 years after Mark, and most scholars believe he had a copy of Mark's gospel in front of him. Both him and Luke used that as a model. Mark said he could do no deed of power because of their unbelief. Matthew modified that and said he did not do any deed of power because of their unbelief. Notice the change? In Mark, faith is dependent on Jesus' action. By the time Matthew is writing, we see growing ideas of divinity being applied to Jesus. A divine person obviously cannot be limited by somebody's unbelief. There's the assumption going on there. And if we take a look within the New Testament, starting with Paul, who had the first writings, in his letter to Romans, which say figure round numbers around 55 BCE, Paul writes that Jesus was given divinity when he was raised from the dead. And that becomes a theme throughout Paul's theology. If you'll notice when you're reading through Paul, everything is geared toward what's going to happen in the future. When you take a look at the divinity ascribed in the Gospels, Mark, for him, this divine status arrived when he was baptized by John the Baptist in the Jordan. Matthew and Luke had this ascribing of divinity taking place at the Transfiguration. John comes along, throws the whole thing out. For John, he's following the Neoplatonic philosophy and basically assigns Jesus the role of the Logos, wisdom, originates from the Father from the very beginning. Divinity always existed. And that's kind of the theme that we have inherited today. What's interesting, all four of these themes, for a while in the early church, got along without any problems. You need to take a look at what happened historically. All four writers that we talked about here were Jewish and used Semitic logic, which is basically both and logic, as opposed to Greek logic, which is either or. And those differences become important. The best example I've run across is for both and logic is the musical Fiddler on the Roof. You're all familiar with it. In that musical, Tevye, the father, has that soliloquy song where he's contemplating the daughter of his eldest daughter to the butcher. And he starts out, this could be a good marriage. On the one hand, he's not the best looking guy in the world. On the other hand, he's a butcher. And he'll provide well for my daughter and my grandchildren. On the other hand, as a butcher, it's kind of a messy job. But on the other hand, she can learn to love him. All those conditions get put together. In Greek logic, it's either or, black or white. we are right, and if I happen to be right, guess what that makes you if you don't agree with me? Wrong. Greek logic is needed to write a computer program. You get a choice of a 1 or a 0 when you're programming a computer. But even in the computer, you have to account for both and logic, because there can be multiple possibilities. You know, in my opinion, the fact that I am bald, I've got blue eyes, I'm good looking. Usually when you put bald and good looking together, there's, sorry folks, those of us who have this problem, they're not looked at, but it's a possibility. These differences became a serious problem in the early church. But it was not until the church had expanded into the Roman Empire. We can blame Paul for this, his evangelism throughout the Mediterranean basin. What happened? They began to apply Greek logic to some Semitic ideas. And as a result, there were countless different versions of who Jesus was. Marcion, Gnosticism, the differences we saw here this morning. And people began arguing about them. One had to be right, the other had to be wrong. And the solution, Constantine happened to be the emperor. He had made Christianity the public religion. And he says, I'm not going to put up for all this bickering. He called the church leaders together to Nicaea, locked them up and said, solve this. Anyone who comes out of this without a solution runs a good chance of execution. Well, those early leaders came up with a solution, which we call the Nicene Creed. And it's kind of been the theme all along. But we've also picked up that theme of who's right and who's wrong. The end result of the Nicene Creed was a lot of persecutions of people not in the Gnostic sects, Marcion sects, and their literatures were destroyed. We have been fortunate to be able to uncover some of them that have been buried. Nam Harabi gave us an example of some of the beliefs that were trying to be obliterated by the official church. And I look at us today, and one thing that when you're preaching, you have a choice. You don't, I do. I mean, you can walk out. But I look at where my faith started. Most of you know my background. Born and raised Catholic Church, went all the way through seminary, was ordained a priest. But on my route there, I received some very interesting education. I went to St. John's Seminary in Little Rock. And in that school, I was taught to think. And they weren't afraid of what I might come up with. That opportunity led me to where I am today. And when I look at Jesus' divinity, I can accept Jesus' divinity, but no more than I can accept yours. I look at all of us participating in God. Now, in most organized religions, that's considered heresy. But my experience has shown me that all of us, a community like us right here, share in that divinity. And if I project an image that you can't see that divinity in me, I am doing something wrong. And I think all of us run that risk. I look at my life today, I believe I have a responsibility to share this belief. It was a gift to me, and I need to share that with others. In the process, I run the danger, and this is kind of embarrassing in a way, but you run the danger of looking at all those stupid people out there who don't agree with me. And that's an attitude. If I project that attitude to a person who's not agreeing with me, they ain't going to see anything divine in me, let me tell you. And I see that as the biggest danger. We need to express respect. And I'll say it in public. Respect even to Rush Limbaugh. My point exactly. If I am not able to do that, you are not going to see anything divine about me. And I see that as our obligation to each other and to people outside this congregation. We have a wonderful gift here. And that gift needs to be shared. And if we cannot do that, if I cannot do that, I look at myself, I'm a failure. It doesn't matter how old I am, my body doesn't work like it used to, but I can still talk. I can still teach people. Those are the gifts I have that I can do. I can come down here occasionally and enjoy. This is the greatest place in the world to preach for me. It's the only place I ever get applauded. But think about that. That means there's a lot of work out there to do. What you all do here with the work with the poor, with trying to work with our state legislature, these are things that need to be done, and you're to be congratulated. But I would caution you, keep respect in mind. Thank you.
You have been watching a progressive Christian video from the Community Christian Church of Springfield, Missouri. We encourage our viewers to donate to our efforts in feeding the homeless and hungry of our community. Write to us at Reverend Dr. Ray at AOL.com for more information.